Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Up and In It. I'm your host, Agent Babishoff, and if you're new here, welcome as well. And if you're wondering what the show is about, it's completely dedicated to creating an alternative lifestyle design that improves quality of life for both people and for the planet, exploring alternatives to the daily grind through liberation and independence, moving you from surviving to thriving and living life raw. And parental guidance, be aware. This is a potty mouth podcast. I don't know why I always stumble on that part. But welcome you guys today. It's April the 10th. 2020, COVID-19. My place is pouring rain. It's flooding everywhere, but that's not what I want to talk about. But I am living in an RV and it's getting completely flooded, and I thought it went good. I posted some stuff on Instagram today about it. And yesterday's podcast was about why you should consider getting into a RV park, living in an RV or a motorhome for the cheap flexibility of it and everything else that went with it. So if you're still with us and you're here for the part 2 on how to full-time stationary RV, meaning that not RVing where you're traveling around, but just living in a stationary place like I am, the benefits of it, and you've got this far, and you kind of want to know a little bit more, that's what we're going to talk about today. So, all right, let's get into it. Well, first of all, before we get into it, I just want to yesterday's podcast was trying to help people right now in this 2020 COVID. We're in April, and this is the only thing I can think of for people to get back to square one, to reboot, to start over, is get yourself in an RV park. Another one I thought of is to put your ego aside, no matter what age you are. Move in with your parents, have your parents move in with you. If you're out and you're single, or you're basically in your 20s and you don't really have a house, you should be grouping up together with friends, family, whatever you can, and suck it up, man. We don't know how long this thing's going to go on for, and it's scary, guys. It is really scary. But I want to steer you guys. I just want to get that one out of the way. I had a couple ideas to share with you guys to hopefully help you guys out. Reason why, if you guys are tuning into, you should listen to a fuck like me. What do I have to bring to the table is that I'm minimally affected by all this stuff here. I've got enough money, food. I've got food for probably the next 60 days, maybe even longer. I've got enough emergency supplies and money to last me over 2 years. I live in an RV park. It seems like I'm poor, but I'm not rich. I don't drive a Lamborghini. In fact, most of my times I'm podcasting when I can in my 7.3 liter diesel pickup truck, an F350, and it's one of the loudest trucks on earth. And today it's pouring rain and we are on quarantine here, so I'm actually in my little studio, my little shack in my RV that's adjacent to my RV. So yeah, let's get into full timing now. I want to start off with tiny houses. Just a couple little notes here, because I know that's an option. That's a very popular thing, but I want to talk about tiny versus RV. And the very first one is price. I touched on a little bit on yesterday's podcast, but I mean, the price, we're going to go a little more detail today. Price is ridiculous. Like, it's $60,000, $70,000, probably even $100,000 to get something decent to build a tiny house. We have lots of other factors here, which is the weight of the tiny house. It will be, in my opinion, that you can customize a tiny house a little better than you can an existing RV or a travel trailer. Although, in my opinion, you can customize an RV trailer. You can gut the whole thing and make it what you want. You will lose the value in it, and you'll also be adding a lot of weight depending on how you proceed with that. But yeah, tiny houses have a lot of weight on them, and they're very hard to transport around in contrast to an RV or a travel trailer. I'm just going to call it RV for the rest of the show, because this one might be a little bit of a long one. And it's a lot cheaper. For 10 grand, you can get yourself pretty decent rig, man. Mine's a 2017, I believe. I paid about 12 grand for it. It's supposedly an all season. I live in Sunnyside, North County, San Diego, so I don't really need an all season. It doesn't get too cold here, and it doesn't get too hot. But yeah, if you're living in other places, you want to make sure you got good insulation and things of that nature. But I will say that the tiny houses are probably a little bit more secure than an RV, because they're not really made to live in. I don't think they're built really that well. I mean, do yourself a favor and check out some of the YouTube videos on like Jayco, how they put these things together. It's like one by stripping with staples, and everything's just slammed so fast together that I think you would definitely get more quality from a tiny house. But the versatility of being able to sell First of all, I think a lot of us are in a hole too. I don't think we have the money to build a tiny house. So in contrast to that, you can go buy something for 10 grand. As I said, it's already got a shower, it's got a sink, it's got a refrigerator, heating and cooling, lights and everything all hooked up. It's the best bet, especially if you're hurting, you're going down and you need to save yourself. I want to talk next on the legalities too. There's places like Fresno, California, I believe. I think San Diego's starting to do some things. With the tiny homes, the advantage that a tiny home has is that in certain cities, not all states, you can't go by state, but you can go by cities, are allowing tiny houses to be put on properties legally. And this is to save homeowners who can't really afford to keep up their payments. You know, a lot of the baby boomers and stuff like that own these big old houses, and now they're single. One of them passed away, and they need help, and so do these younger people to get started. So they're allowing them to actually put them in. You can lay yourself a gravel bed. You can tie in directly to the sewer if there's a big enough septic tank, or if you're grid tied to the city. Minimal electrical hookups. I think that's going to be your main ones, is just electric and power, and also, you know, plumbing. Water to your rig is really cheap and really easy, and I'm not going to go into details about how to set one up, but I just kind of wanted to give you guys a heads up on just a little, kind of scratch the surface there in case you were wondering. I definitely would say if you don't have the money or the time, you should pick up an RV. Whether you're moving a tiny house or an RV, I think you need to get a truck, man. Get yourself a Ford, a 96 F-350 American built. They're really nice. I love my truck. I just don't, just quickly, like an off spur here, is I don't understand why a lot of people drive passenger vehicles. They don't really serve you that well. I mean, they get a lot better MPG than most of these trucks. I mean, mine's modified. It's a diesel, and I'm getting, if it was empty, I can get like 19, 20 miles per gallon. It's the same as a Toyota 4Runner. Maybe not the new ones, but not quite bad. But in contrast to the MPG, the versatility of a truck, you're able to haul garbage or pick up refrigerators, do deliveries, yard cleanup, start a gardening service business. Like, you can do so much. But if you're in this sort of living where you want to live in a tiny house, or you want to do the RV, a truck is definitely essential. You don't have to have it, which brings me into my next line here. RV movers. There's people around here, I'm not sure in your state or where you're at, but they will move an RV for you. They've got the trucks and everything for around anywhere from $250 to $500, depending on the distance. So you don't really have to have a truck if you're going to get into the tiny house or you're going to get into the RV living. You can definitely hire somebody one time to move something for you, and it's done. So now we're going to move on to the buyer's guide. There's a couple questions, too, I can see here that I would like you guys to ask the owners before you purchase over the phone and waste your time going in. Because you see, it's a whole scenario where you're driving over to see something and it's not what the person said it was, and this and that. So there's kind of like two basic questions that I like to ask right off the bat. First one is, what maintenance programs have or maintenance has been performed on the trailer or the RV since you've owned it? And we're going to get into some maintenance issues there of exactly what that you want to see. I'll throw you guys out a couple. You want to make sure that the water heater's been flushed. You want to make sure that the roof's been coated. You want to make sure that the rubber around the slide out has been coated and things like that, and cleaned up. And the batteries were been tendered and things of that nature. And yeah, you want to make sure, ask these questions, because if somebody can't answer those, that means they probably didn't do anything. There's a very good chance. Not saying that you shouldn't go look at it, but it's a good chance that you're going to have things that are going to fall apart. And we're going to get into what you should take when you go to look at an RV or you go to purchase one. So maintenance questions really important, I think, with everything that you're buying, a home, a car. The next one is the current registration. You got to make sure that they don't owe back on the tags because they didn't keep the registration up. I think that one's kind of a given, but I think it slips by some people's minds. Now, this one kind of sounds racist. The guy, a lot of people call them China bombs. That's the tires. When you go purchase a trailer, especially if it's been sitting in storage for a long time or someone's been living in it, you got to look at those tires and make sure they're not more than like 8-10 years old. If there's cracks on the side of them, but especially if they're an off-brand name that you've never even heard of. You could be taking this thing home, and they call them China bombs because this thing is, the tires are built probably in China, and they just pop. They'll blow up, and you can get in an accident. You can be stuck on the side of the road. And that's why I'm going to give you this list of things that you should bring when you're going to look at one to possibly buy. Next is the plumbing. There's a thing called Poly B plumbing. This was built from the 1970s to the 90s. 1990s, and it's a gray tubing. They used to use it in homes as well, and you can tell by looking at it because it will be all gray. The hot and the cold water, I believe, will be like a light gray color. There'll be plastic fittings, the elbows that actually connect the plumbing together, plastic fittings which get hot and crack. And there's also some with copper fittings, which copper is very soft, could expand, can get bent through the pressurization of the hoses, and could come undone. So they actually had to recall a bunch of this stuff that's going on, that was put inside of houses. But you'll also find this in mobile homes, and you'll also find this inside of trailers built from anywhere from the 70s to the mid 90s, somewhere around there. So what you could do is you can peek underneath the trailer to see, open up an area, or you can pick up usually the RVs, over the shower and stuff like that, will have like these little peek hole areas, little access places. You can lift that up, look under your sink, the kitchen sink or the bathroom sink, and see what pipes are coming out. If they're both gray and they've got the plastic fittings, you're in for a heap of trouble, and I would stay away from that, because unlike a tiny house or a regular stick-built home, or even a mobile home for that matter, you got to pull walls and everything, flooring out, and these things are built basically, to tell you in a nutshell, there's like a trailer frame that comes in, right? Then they put the floor on the whole entire thing. They laminate the whole thing. You understand these things are built in speed to get mass quantities out there. The whole framework sits on top of the floor. It's stapled or screwed in, nailed in, or whatever, depending on what manufacturer you have. The insulation goes in, all the cabinets are put in, and everything's screwed to itself. So you literally have to take this thing like apart to really get to sometimes to one thing. The kitchen sink's got to come out, so it's a pain in the ass. So if you notice that they got the Poly B plumbing tubing in there, you might not want to purchase that thing, depending on how savvy you are with doing plumbing work. You want to test every electrical outlet, everything. You're going to bring yourself something to plug in to make sure you can maybe say like a little night light or something, plug in each receptacle and make sure they're working, because that's also a nightmare. If you've got a short somewhere in the wall or something's going on, you can be in a heap of problems. Crossing wires, it can turn into a big problem. So you want to make sure that everything's working. Unless you're savvy to do these things, all these tips that I'm sharing with you will definitely give you leverage to get a better deal on it. But know this, it is not a walk in the park to do all these repairs, especially the electrical. One very important one is test the slide out. We know before we go out further, test all the lights, test everything, switch all the lights on and off, check every single modem of power that goes in there, including the slide out. Let the slide out go all the way out till it's fully extended. Bring it back in. Do this about 3, 4, 5 times to make sure that this thing doesn't get stuck. There's a little solenoid, a little gearbox in there that sometimes this thing freezes up. And it's not that hard to fix. I actually did a video on it on YouTube a few years ago on one of my older trailers that I owned, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and showed kind of detailed on how to fix it. But it's definitely not a walk in the park, and you want to make sure that all that stuff is working. You want to check the battery bank. You want to see how old the batteries are. Now there's a date usually on a battery. It's either inscribed with a tool on there, the date, or there's a sticker on the side. If batteries are more than 5 years old, they're most likely going to be changed out. You want to check the terminals to make sure if they've been serviced and maintenance. If they're full of a powdery, a bluish, greenish, or whitish powder around them, you most likely have you're going to have some problems. You also want to check the wiring around the harness that goes onto the actual terminals. And you want to wiggle that to make sure it's not all loose. And you want to check the wires to make sure there's no green, bluish, aqua color staining on the wires. That means that the wires are actually corroded, and you're going to have to cut the wires back and redo the terminals and everything else. So you definitely want to check that all out. The fridge and freezer, you should, if you can, have them turn these things on before you come, so that you can see actual ice in the freezer. You know, you can see everything's ice cold in there. The Frigerator, same thing. This should be done about an hour to 2 hours before you arrive to make sure everything's working. You also want to use the toggle switch that they have on there that goes to propane to electric, or it goes automatic. It's got an automatic, what's pretty cool about trailers, a lot of people don't know, is you can put it on auto so it'll sense what's going on. If you run out of propane, it automatically switches to electricity. Some of them have three-way where they can actually go to a battery as well, I believe. But yeah, if there was ever a power outage or something and you've got your propane, it's really nice. If you're gone, it'll just automatically switch over and you don't have to do a thing, and you'll save all your food. But yeah, check that out there. Inspect all areas of the ceiling and the floor. Let's start with the ceiling first. You're going to want to go and open up cabinetries. You're going to want to go in the corners of each. Basically, the four corners are always a very danger zone in trailers. And you want to observe for staining. You want to take your hand and you want to push firmly and make sure there's no soft spots, that somebody maybe wallpapered over a problem that they fixed. You also want to check the corners that run from floor to ceiling. Usually those areas you can check for staining, and I mean check under the bed, go into the under storage compartments, check out inside there to make sure there was no staining on the floor and on the ceiling. Also on the floors, you want to go and walk around the toilet. You want to check underneath the shower. This is really good for mobile homes too, by the way, which I might be in the process of purchasing one here this week. I'm not sure. But yeah, you want to step on the floor and make sure there's no water stains and make sure there's no soft spots at all. I mean, travel trailers and RVs, once they get mold and damage in them, it's like cancer. That thing is a bitch to take apart and fix. It's not even worth it in my book. If you got dry rot in something, just move on to the next one. Yeah, so check out same thing under the beds, everywhere, all the corners, the perimeter of the floors, everything, inside and out. You also are going to want to climb underneath there, and it's probably a good time to tell you guys to bring a flashlight. I've got that on my list at the bottom here, what to bring, but yeah, you want to take yourself a flashlight. I like a headlamp myself and one of those little power lamps. But yeah, you want to check out for cracks in the storage containers too, and also the ABS piping. That's the black piping that comes out of the storage tanks. So you've got your black water, you've got your gray water. You also have a drinking water storage tank on most of them, made for camping, so you can have a potable water. So you want to check all of those really well around the sides and the edges for any cracks. Those are it's very common, especially in the hot regions, where that plastic gets very dehydrated and they'll want to snap. And you're going to have to plan on that anyways, that one day they are going to have to be replaced. The black water is very nasty. I haven't replaced the tank yet because I trade up every couple of years, so I don't have to deal with things like that. But before you buy your first one, make sure you can check everything and wiggle the pipes around. I mean, don't strong arm them, but just kind of wiggle them around and really inspect to see if there's any cracks around the elbows and things like that, because that could really be a pain in the ass. This is probably a good time too, I didn't put on my notes, to turn on the water levels. Usually the water, your drinking water levels, your potable water will always work. It doesn't really fail. Your gray water is usually not a problem as well. There's these little lights that will light up to tell you what the capacity is, whether it's half full, empty, or just completely full. The problem one is the toilet. If people don't use the right type of toilet paper, it just shows full all the time. And the reason it'll do this is because they have these little sensors that go in there. Usually I think there's about 4 or 5 of them that come in to tell the depth of the fluid that's in there. And when the toilet paper is wrapped around it, this thing will just light up continuously and always show that it's full. Mine right now, when I purchased it, that was some leverage that I got to get the price down lower. But I just pretty much check mine. I flush the toilet and I keep an eye out in the hole. Once you see it starting to get close to the floor, keep a real good eye on it. Or just once a week. There's 3 of us, and it's pretty much once a week I've got to empty out my black tank, the sewer, and flush it all out and clean it, which is another, I would say this is another plus on the RVs. I think most of the new ones have them too, is where they have an automatic flushing system for the black water tank, meaning that there's a water hose that you can hook up to the outer part. You can turn on a hose, and it has basically this wand in there that just circulates and just rinses the entire black tank out, and you just let that sit there for a while as you're flushing it to just get everything nice and clean, and it's pretty much maintenance free and keeps down with the odor. So that's a really good feature to look for when you're buying one. I want you guys to go and open up all the door hinges. All the doors that are in the place, slide them, open them. Look, mine in the master bedroom that I have, the sliding doors, they keep popping off the rail. It's a pain in the ass. I still, some things I haven't fixed. The doors, you want to grab like the bathroom door and just lift it up and down a little bit. Make sure it's not cracked or stripped, that you have to put new hinges or hardware on. Same thing with the front door. Inspect the front door for cracks in the plastic. Usually that's a very common thing from dehydration or your kids slamming stuff around. So yeah, but I think another one too is the drawers, the cabinetry and everything. Open those up. Usually they're made out of particle board or something. And if someone was a little too rough and broke the screw out, you're going to have to replace the entire panel. And good luck. Good luck with finding something like that. You're going to have to actually try to salvage the thing by putting wood filler or something, because you're not going to find the same grain of wood stained glass window like I have in mine that kind of lets you see inside. It's just, you're going to want to make sure that nobody strong-armed that thing. So check all the doors and hinges. Next, you're going to check all the windows. I'm going to open and close the windows. And I think this is a good time to check the screens to see if they have any tears or anything in them. Also the blinds, put the blinds up and down, make sure they're not all corroded or torn. Like my kids are they're tearing apart everything in my trailer. It's ridiculous. It's so frustrating. I don't know why I'm a parent. But they're worth it. But another thing in windows is, I'm going to give you guys a tip here, is that they get dirty. They're on a sliding track, right? So sometimes people will forcefully just push the window and they actually break the frame, which is made out of aluminum. They've got 4 parts, or I think 2 parts. You got the whole front, and then you got the back area. That's where it's got the little sliding lock. Well, people will grab that and rip it, and that aluminum is not too tough, and it ends up breaking the screws right out of the whole entire window frame, and you'll have to completely rebuild it. Another, not so much of a pain in the ass, but still something to consider. The track system basically need to be cleaned or waxed or something so that the window can proceed and open and close correctly. But check every single window out and make sure you don't have something that's broken. The next one you're going to want to do is you're going to want to check the skylight for cracks. And usually this is the best done from the top, from the roof. And we're going to get into that. Go over there and push on them, not very hard, not strong, just take your finger and press on them. You can usually tell they start to look really milky, and you can start to see a little bit of stress cracks. And it's not that hard to really replace them, but again, it gives you leverage to maybe get the price down lower for all these things, because if you add these things up and you take it in an RV shop, they're like $1.25, I believe, an hour, not including parts, just to fix that thing. I mean, you're looking at a couple $1,000 probably to get, if you had to get a window replaced and all the skylights done, and maybe you had a plumbing issue or electrical, like you're looking at $1,000, maybe even more. So yeah, check out the skylights. You want to make sure that sometimes they're sealed in. They're one solid piece of plastic, a dome, that's actually put with caulking around. I hate those things. They're always going to crack. Those ones are not very good. You will have to replace them eventually. It's not if, it's when. And those will have more probability of cracking than actually the little tiny lid ones on the top that go over the actual vents. These bubble ones are usually put over the shower. So definitely check that out. And if somebody's put sealants, I'd like to share too, over the cracks, that isn't going to do anything. That's just going to make the thing crack even more. The whole thing needs to be replaced. It's not worth it to try to seal them up. So yeah, check out the skylights. And next you're going to want to go around and check out the roof sealants, all roof penetrations. You're going to want to see the sealants around and inspect them. You can rub your finger around them. If you get this chalky residue, that means we have oxidization. And if it's really, I mean, you rub this thing with your finger and it's just rubbing down and down and down, that means that it's fully corroded. Usually you can tell it looks like alligator skin, or you can start to see cracks around it. That means you're going to have to reseal everything on that. You're going to have to clean it, wash it, primer it, and seal everything all up. And that's a lot of work right there. And that's a couple thousand, that's easily $1,000 just to do that there. You want to check out next your roof type. It's very smart. I think they usually use, it's called an EPDM. It's basically like a pond liner. They've made commercial buildings with it for as far as the roofing goes. They're usually white to reflect the heat, but it's a EPDM rubberized roof. And you want to make sure that wasn't put in pieces. What's really nice is when they get a whole skin and skin the entire roof. And I'll tell you why. Is because most roofs fail anywhere there's a joint. Most areas of even the walls of your RV will, or even a tiny house, that's wherever you have a penetration of any kind where it needs to be sealed. And you got to understand, metal gets hot, things move from you being inside the trailer, it kind of fluctuating or vibrating and moving around, depending on what you're doing. You're going to get stress cracks. So the elimination of any kind of seams is always best. You want to definitely make sure that you can walk on them. Most of them, the newer ones, are safe. But definitely test it first with your weight before you go prancing around and doing Dancing with the Stars on top. All right, so yeah, I'll move on to your exterior fixtures. You want to go out and check your exterior fixtures, meaning the lining around, like say the door compartments that go into the understorage, or the doors that go around the water heater, and any kind of pipe vent sticking out, or even the windows. If it's been sealed before, that's most likely it had a problem. Or it could be like me, where I've used silicone white caulking, and I sealed mine anyways just as a preventative, because I did have one of my light fixtures that leaked. And what was crazy is that there was no sign of leakage on the inside, right? I was watching these YouTube videos and just kind of looking the way problem solving and maintenance, and there was this guy who had the exact same trailer as me, and he had a bad leak. The whole outer skin of the trailer started to bubble, and it was because of a light. And sure enough, I took off a light off the wall, and even though there was no sign of water damage inside of my trailer, there was mud and water saturated in the, not a whole lot, but you can see a big streak going into the insulation. So what I did is I popped all of my light fixtures off, all the outdoor speakers and things like that. And what I did is I redid the RV putty around the light frame itself, and then also did silicone around that. Placed everything back, screwed everything back in, pressed it against the putty, and then also sealed with silicone around the edges as a preventative, especially since it's stationary. If I was driving, I think that silicone would probably crack within a year. But since it's sitting there, it's a good thing to have. And as long as you have, like I did video on me repairing and preventative maintenancing everything. As long as the person could prove that there wasn't a leak and they just went and slopped some sealant on it, then I think you're all good. I think it's actually better that they're sealed that way. There's a certain way, like for me, I use rubbing alcohol. I scraped all the putty off around each light fixture, sanded kind of really lightly, washed it off with a paper towel and isopropyl, basically rubbing alcohol to clean any contaminations, and that dries very quickly. Then we sealed it right away and screwed everything back in, so we get a nice, good, snug, tight fit. So yeah, your exterior, I talked about your water heater being flushed, and I think I've got this in the maintenance. You want to make sure that they've got the that they've flushed their water heater out, and the way you do that, I guess I'll just tell it to you guys right now, is you want to get white vinegar and you want to circulate it through the entire system of the water heater. And what's going to happen is it's going to come out with a milky kind of looking residue, and also there might be some rust or some parts of things that, like little bits of like calcium. You may even run a little bit of that CLR stuff they sell, little calcium deposit mineral remover. Keep everything all nice and clean. Also, there is a not a diode. What the fuck did they call it? I can't remember. Well, basically, there's this rod that goes in there, and it will collect all the minerals and stuff. It'll attract. It's like a magnet, right? It keeps all the bad stuff. It collects it to itself instead of it sticking to the walls of your water heater. And you can pull that thing out. Usually, it's attached to the thermostat, to the where the what do they call that thing to? Oh my God, I'm fumbling here. It's a relief pressure valve. There you go. Usually that thing's stuck to there, and you pull it out, it'll be all just full of a bunch of, it looks like stone. And you want to make sure that that's been changed. And you're going to have to use some Teflon tape. That's not something you want to take apart unless you're buying the thing, but you want to know that that's been a part of the maintenance program. The rubber treatments, as I said, there's actually a spray that you can buy. It's kind of like Armor All that they use for cars. That's where the slide out comes out. There's this big flap of rubber that will go over that, and that helps to keep the dirt and dust out in the water, those things start to get cracked and dried unless you go out. A good rule of thumb is about at least twice a year. I try to do mine 3 times a year. There's this little solvent spray can you can get where you spray the rubber and you wipe it all down, and it basically lubricates it so that it stays safe. You can imagine the amount of money it would cost to have to pull all that apart and redo that. So you want to make sure that that was done. If it's not and you do own one, make sure that you're doing the rubber treatment. All right, we're going to move on now to what to bring when you're buying an RV. You want to bring a voltage meter, and you want to check your batteries. Your battery should be reading at least 13 point something. You want to put the settings on DC2, and you have a positive and negative. You can buy one of these things for like $1 at Harbor Freight. Put the positive to the positive, negative to the negative, and get a battery reading to find out what the charge is on the battery. If it's down low to like 12 or 10 or something, you're definitely in the red. You should be around 13, I think, what is it, 13.14 and higher. That's a really decent charge. It means that the batteries have a good charge. And also I would let you know that some of these newer ones like mine, they actually keep the batteries tendered. They keep them charged. If not, you need to get a battery tenderer. It's basically this little thing that you can plug in and it into a AC electric. Has these little alligator clips, and it basically keeps the battery at full charge and capacity and keeps it basically babysat. The battery, I think I spoke about that. You want to make sure it's current, that it's not over 5 years old, and that it's not dirty. And we talked about the corrosion on the fittings. You want to bring a flashlight, a headlight, and a handheld flashlight. And I think it's a good idea to bring yourself some overalls. Wear that when you go in, because if you're climbing underneath this thing and there's dirt and there's spiders and stuff in there, and I think it's definitely worth climbing in to inspect everything very closely. Bring yourself some overalls. It makes life a lot easier. Even better yet, I have this full bodysuit that's Dickies bodysuit that plumbers and mechanics wear. So it basically zips up, and all the holes I have is my neck, my legs, and my hands, my wrists. And that keeps a lot out of your clothes, out from entering into your skin. You also want to bring a long extension cord. I don't know how many times I've gone to the place like, yeah, we don't have a cord. Well, I got one. Let's plug this baby in and see what it's got. You know, if you also have a generator, bring yourself a generator. I've been in places where these RVs are stored, and they're just like in the storage unit, right? This parking area, and there's no electricity, no lights, no nothing. That way you can hook it up, you can turn everything on, and find out if you're interested or not in getting this thing. I think you should also bring yourself a propane tank. That way you can hook that up in case they say, well, we're selling it, we don't have, the tanks are empty. Hook that thing up. Spend an hour if you need to. Make sure that the heater's working. Make sure that the AC's working. I forgot to tell you guys that one. Turn on all the appliances. Check the stove. You want to make sure the stove's on. You want to make sure the heater's working, as I said. What am I missing here? The thermostat. The water heater, that it goes on and doesn't pop off. If not, you might have a bad igniter. Do that. Turn it on and off at least 5 times and make sure that it's starting and stopping when it's supposed to. So yeah, bring yourself a propane tank. That way there's no excuses. Now this next one's kind of an off one. It's a spare tire, a wrench, and a jack. You should get yourself one of those star wrenches, they call them, and they got all the multiple fittings on it. You should have one of those anyways if the trailer doesn't have one with it. But if you can get a spare tire, they're usually pretty universal. I think they're all 5 lug, depending on how heavy. If they're a toy trailer, they might be even a 6 lug. Meaning the holes in it where the nuts go through. But if you've got a China bomb, or you've got some tire that looks like it's a little bad or something, you really want to buy this thing and you're frustrated, like I was driving around looking at a bunch of them, it gets frustrating and it gets real tiring. But you find one that you like and it actually has a nail in the tire or something, it doesn't hurt to have that spare tire, so that when you decided you made the purchase and you're driving home, you get a flat, you're able to change it, fix it right there. Just in my opinion, I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but it's nice to have. And also, as I said, at least a 1-ton jack, a bottlenose jack if you've got it. And bring yourself a couple boards in case you've got some thick, like 2x4s and stuff, in case you got to build it up to get the jack underneath the axle. I'm not going to go in on specifically how to fix it. You can YouTube that, because we've got a lot of information here today. One problem I found too is the hitch was not included. I'm like, are you kidding me? Come on, I brought my own hitch. But make sure the hitch is included, the part that actually goes into the pickup truck. These things have anywhere from, these small trailers have a 1.5 inch ball to 2 inch to 2 I think it's 2 5/16. You know, they're really large balls on there. You want to make sure that hitch comes with it and that it's also adjustable to fit the your vehicle, whichever you're towing it with. So make sure that's included and get the dimensions. And it's kind of nice to have your own shit though, in case stuff goes bad. But you can easily go down to Home Depot or an auto parts place or an RV supply house and get yourself a really nice one. But they do get pricey, and I would recommend that you buy a really good one. It's very important. That thing cracks, and yeah, you're in big trouble. Speaking of that too, which I don't have in my notes, you want to make sure all the lights are working. That's usually a big problem, and it could be anything. It could be a bad bulb out, you know, the parking lights and the blinkers. It could be a bulb, or it could be the head that actually plugs into your vehicle. You might want to have the owner of the trailer or the RV too, I guess mostly it's just a trailer, have them take a picture, a photograph of the actual plug that plugs into the vehicle, and make sure you have the exact same one. Maybe they can put a tape measure up against the front of it, the face, and you can count how many pins it has in it. Usually I think they're 5 or up to 6. You want to make sure you've got something that matches, that way you're able to tow that thing away that day. Otherwise you're going to have to go to the auto parts and you're going to have to reconfigure the whole electrical system, and that could get really confusing and hard. All right, basic tips on once you get your trailer. You need to learn. We all here, we laugh when we get new RVers in. They're there for 2 hours. I don't know. I've done it at least 3 times where I was like, dude, get out of your truck. I'll just park it for you. Or I stirred them in. You want to know how to back up. You want to know how to pull in. And the trick is you want to always be facing. You always want to be able to look out the driver's side mirror. It's a lot easier to jackknife something from the side than it is from the left side than it is to your right, because once you start jackknifing, you can't see. Whereas when you're jackknifing, turning your wheels, I guess that would be to the right, so that you're let me see if I got that correct. Now I'll mess it. Yeah, if you're turning your wheel to the right-hand side of you and you're jackknifing the trailer, that's going to make it go to the left. You can stick your head out the window and you can kind of guide yourself in if you don't have somebody. But even if somebody's helping you, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to actually see, because the distance in the mirrors are very deceiving, and I think it could ruin marriages. So yeah, always strategize your way to come in and pull in from the driver's side so you can look out your window. The other thing is when you're looking at your trailer and you pull the slide out, take yourself a tape measure, which is something I didn't mention in there. There's probably a lot of things that I'm forgetting in here, but I think I've given you guys quite a bit here to get started. Get yourself a tape measure and measure the distance as how far the slide out goes out. Why is this important? Because once you get your rig straightened up and you get it into your parking spot at the RV park, you're gonna have to go back and forth a few times to get it measured in, so that you want to get as much distance as you can right on your mark. Right? There's not a lot of space living in RV parks in your lot, so you want to make sure you're right on your zone, your confined line there. And what happens is once you get there, sometimes there's poles or trees. You got to make sure that you're away enough so when you open the pop out, it's not going to smack into a tree or an electric line or something like that. It's not going to get obstructed. So what I've done with mine is I literally walked in and measured it from the back of my trailer exactly how to where the pop out started, and then I also measured the width of how far it goes out, the length. And what I did is I measured it in the dirt with my foot, took a tape measure and got it exactly, made 2 marks with my shoes. When I backed it in, I pulled out the slide out, and it came perfectly right up against my line, right up against by the tree, left a few inches there. That way you're not going back and forth, opening and closing it, and it could just turn into a mess. This is also the time where you're going to want to level everything out. You're going to want to have yourself either some little wooden platforms, some concrete pavers, or they sell little platforms in the RV storage area. You're going to want to make sure that everything's level. Your fridge is circulated with ammonia. It's got the circulatory system. Don't ask me how it works. It's got a little flame that heats it up, and it actually causes your refrigerator to be cold. Well, when you're tilted, that ammonia gets obstructed, and I guarantee you don't want to spend. These refrigerators are ridiculous. They're smaller than shit, and they're over $1,000. For them to operate optimally and And for you too, if things aren't rolling off your table, you want to get your trailer nice and level. That's probably another thing that you want to bring is a level to put on the chassis or over on the floor of your trailer, and just make sure that everything's all nice and level from the width to the length, and just keep setting it, backing up and going forward until you feel comfortable. A lot of the new ones like mine actually have a bubble on the front, but it doesn't have one on the side. So what I did is I used the front to make sure that was level. And then as far as the length and then the width, I put one on the bumper on the back of mine, and then I kind of used some jack stands to help kind of level it out, and some wedges, and that helped me out a lot. Another basic tip here is your year built. Before you go and buy something, make sure that if you do have an RV park and you've applied to get at one, that you can you got to find out what their speculations are. Sometimes there's a certain year, like mine is, they don't want anything under that's over 10 years old. Now, on contrast, there are people who actually live in trailers who have been living for a very long time in most RV parks, and you can buy something that's already there. It's a pain in the ass for the person to move. They need to get rid of it, or you know, whatever have you. Something happened, and the trailers. There's a good chance you can strike a deal where you could buy something that's already pre-existing and it's already there. A lot of times it's nice too, because people already have like a fence. You already got this whole setup there, like a fence thing. They got an awning, and like mine actually came with this the shack that I have, this little tool shed. The other thing is you'd like to consider when picking out a spot is if you're south facing or north facing. I am actually facing south on the side, but I'm actually butt up against the hillside. So the hill's behind me, and that's actually facing almost south, so southwest, I'm sorry. So the hot part of the day, the sun actually has to go through my canopy, which I have up, which we'll talk about in a bit. And my trailer is completely shaded except for the roof, which is coated with a silicone coating that reflects the heat and keeps my rig a lot cooler. Thing is, though, it's depending on what climate you're in. Now, if you're, I got myself in the shadows, right? Now, in the wintertime like right now, I'm freezing cold. We're in the shade. But if I go down to my neighbor's house right now, they're nice and warm. The thing I look at is I like to pile on some clothes, because you can always get warmer. When it's hot, you can only get so much cooler until you got to there's only so many clothes you can take off. You ain't getting cooler. So depending on where you're at, if you're in a cold zone, you probably want to be more on the south facing area, with more sun exposure. And if you want to have a small garden like I'm doing, and yes, they do allow it here, you get more sun than I'm getting here when I've got, I'm in the shade. So things to consider when you're moving in an RV park. All right, the essentials. I know this is a lot, but you guys, let's take a little break here for you. And these things are very affordable. You can find them in any state. These are RV parks, and there's people that live here indefinitely. There's people I've known that I don't think they were born here, but they've been here for like 25, 30, 40 years. And it's the best advantage that you can have. $250 to $500 a month here in Sunnyside, Northern California, or Northern San Diego. I'm paying up to $850, but that's a steal for here. You are not going to find a place for $850. And in yesterday's podcast, I mentioned water, trash. I got a swimming pool, jacuzzi. We've got a playground. We've got fishing over here. We even have access to somewhat of some hiking. And it's all done for you. It's like, and the gardeners come out and they clean everything up except for around my area. So definitely something to look into. So let's get into the essentials. A dehumidifier. A dehumidifier is essential. You want to make sure that, as I said, the moisture is the devil. Moisture is the evil. It will penetrate. You start getting mold and stuff. Even in a dry area, just your breathing and everything at nighttime will it'll dry up. Unless you're in Arizona, I think you're probably fine. But in most places, you're going to want to have a dehumidifier. I get up to like 2.5 gallons a day, a night. I don't even run it during the day. I just run it during the night. Interesting thing is I got my rifles and I've got a BB gun that I have inside here in my shed. Don't have a dehumidifier, and everything's rusting. San Diego County is very humid, especially here on the coastal regions. And I noticed everything's rusting, but my rifles that were inside my trailer, not a single ounce of rust on them. So that dehumidifier really works to save the walls and everything. I think a lot of you will find that when you put like a heater on inside, I never knew that the propane actually releases moisture in the air. So you'll find in the morning you wake up, your windows are all wet. The walls will even be wet. Everything will be sweating. It's going to get stinky. It's going to get moldy in there. Do yourself a favor and get yourself a good quality dehumidifier. I speak a lot on this show about buying good quality stuff. Don't go buy yourself a cheap little piece of shit one. If you can't afford like one of the best, go in the middle and get your. I'm not affiliated. I don't have anybody I can recommend to you. But other than do your homework, check out some humidifiers, and get yourself a mid-size one. There's some that actually have multiple functions where they filter the air out as well, which is nice. So you might want to consider something like that. The AC unit you don't want to use. These things get expensive. I said, I'm not sure if I mentioned it here yet, these things aren't built really to live in. They're built mostly for weekend warriors, and to run that thing 24/7 is a very bad idea. We're going to talk about what to do about that a little bit later, of how we can combat not using the AC unit. So let's move on to the next one is the heater. I use space heaters, but they do... in my rent, my water and trash is included, but my electricity is not. Electricity is very expensive here in San Diego. So I use my heater in my trailer, and it's got an automatic thermostat. I've tried different ones where I forget what they call it. It's convectional heat or something. They put off. They're supposed to be more efficient, and I don't think that they are. Basically. I use the heater inside mine only during the winter time, especially now there's COVID-19. I need to keep my kids nice and warm and healthy. I don't want anybody waking up cold. When I was by myself living in it, in a trailer, I never used the heater. In fact, I've lived in the back of my truck when I was with my ex-wife. I don't want to get into crazy details for you, but basically, that's why I live where I live. It's not that bad. You do wake up every once in a while, though. Your nose is frozen. It's really, really cold. Not like ice cold, but it's cold enough to wake you up. Just stick your head back in the blanket and man up. So yeah, you definitely use the heater. The stoves really suck. The stove tops, not so much. They're not bad. The ovens, they just burn everything. I think you want to use such things, which I'm in love, guys. Air fryers. Oh my God, these things are so diverse, and you can make so many. We just made some bananas today, then we made some hot tuna melts in them. We're gonna make pizza, and we're making flautas and rolled tacos and tonight for dinner. Maybe I'll take a picture and put that on Instagram and TikTok if you guys want to check out. Everything's up and in it. I'm really excited about this thing, but I love it because it saves space. It's a lot less cleanup. It's really easy when you're in the hustle like me, when you're working your ass off, especially if you're a single dad, you're putting in some hours, man. And this thing is a fucking tool, but it'll also save. Remember what I said about the propane throwing moisture out? I cook everything. My next one, which is a charbroiled grill. Again, I have no affiliates with anybody. There's no sponsors or nothing like that. But you're cooking outside. I would like to cook inside when it is cold, but living in a 250 square feet heats up really, really fast. But again, I don't want that moisture and steam going up in the ceiling and messing things up. So everything I use my barbecue as an oven. Sooner or later here, going to use it as a smoker. We've made pizza, we've made bread, we've made all kinds of things, cookies and brownies, which actually we're going to make brownies tomorrow, and my kids are pretty excited. But yeah, get yourself a really good barbecue. I chose to get the infrared. I'll give you guys a little sneak one here, is get yourself some of those fire bricks. I got some that are about 1 inch thick, at about, I don't even know what they are. I think about 5.5 inch wide by like 10 inches long. And what you could do is lay those on the bottom, and then you could put your things like lasagna or your pizza or cookies in your cookie sheet on top of that. And that way it doesn't burn from the heat of the grill. So yeah, guys, you can basically cook anything on a grill, and it saves you from heating up the place in the summer and keeps it from deteriorating. So cook all of your food outside, and yeah. So you know what I think I forgot to mention, you guys, speaking of cooking and a barbecuer, is what I've done to not use my fridge and freezer. I don't know if I'm jumping the gun on my notes because I got so many for you guys. I actually went and bought a chest freezer. a regular home one, and I've got an electric outlet on the outside of my trailer. I plug a stand-up fridge that has a little side-by-side freezer on that, and I've got the chest freezer full of meats right now, by the way, flash frozen vegetables and fruits. That's why I'm minimally affected by this whole COVID thing. I think I got more than 2 months worth of food. We don't have to go anywhere, and we're eating like kings, although we're rationing it because we don't want to get cocky. But right adjacent to that is my barbecuer, and I use the chest freezer most of the time almost like a table. But I've got all my meats and vegetables, like I said, and stuff in the fridge, so everything's right there. We pretty much live outside, but that's the type of people we are anyways. I think a lot of people are hamsters. They like to be indoors, so, but it will help you to covoid. Jesus, my throat's getting scratchy. It will help you to save your the interior of your trailer. Water heater. I think if you're going to live full time, you might want to consider getting yourself one of those on demand. So meaning that every time you turn the water heater on, as fast as the water could go in, it heats it up and it stops when you shut the water off. So it's an automatic water heater on demand, not a tank where it has to keep heating the tank. What sucks about those, especially if you've got more than 2 people, is you're taking an army shower. There's not a lot of capacity held in those things. So a tankless water heater, there it is, automatic one, is definitely worth the money. They're expensive to actually get the right kind that go inside the actual cavity. You have to pull your old one apart and put the new one in. If you don't have the money for that, you can actually get some. I think I had one, was I can't remember. It was like 4 liters per minute or something of hot water. It was a Camp Chef, I think it was. That thing was badass, man. You just hook up a water hose to the bottom, very simple. You can pipe that thing into your trailer, and you can have on-demand water. These things go for about $100. And like I said, definitely it'll save you from wear and tear. And if you ever want to resell your trailer and get out of this whole RV thing, you've used minimal amount of wear and tear on it. Frigerator, you're going to want to use a temperature, a little thermostat. They sell them really cheap and get them probably for $1. It has no electricity or batteries in it. It just tells you the temperature in your fridge. Reason why I tell this is your campers aren't very well insulated, and in the summertime here, even if it doesn't really get that hot, maybe 90s, very rarely close to 100. But you're going to notice that your food will start going bad a little quicker, and your freezer might start melting. So you kind of almost for the seasons have to keep adjusting your temperatures from high to low. And there's at least the ones I have, the Frigerator freezer, they don't have a temperature gauge on it. You could read like digital or something. You got to kind of toggle the switch around from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you kind of mess around with it as things heat and cool. It sucks to have fresh things like lettuce and eggs and things that get frozen from the back of the fridge. So yeah, you definitely get the fluctuations. Another hack I'm going to give you guys for your freezer, whether it's your home freezer or your RV freezer, is get yourself some plastic cutting boards, those really thin ones. And what you're going to do is you're going to slice them up to fit perfectly. You're going to want to line the whole cavity of your freezer. That way the ice collects on there. I don't know if you guys ever had experience living in an RV. These things will literally ice, like within 4 months, you'll have like an inch of ice around the whole thing, and you got to defrost it. What's nice about this little hack is you could actually just pull the plastic cutting boards off the side of the wall. Of course, remove all your food. Pull these things and everything cracks and falls out. You put them right back and put all your food back instead of having to put everything in a nice chest and wait for it to thaw out. The toilets are a pain in the ass. I don't have much to say to that other than what we used to do is use the bathrooms, the public restrooms that they have over here to save some money in hardships if you are in hard times. I don't know if you want to be doing that with the whole coronavirus thing. But yeah, your toilets, you want to always find out what model you have and get yourself the replacement ball, the flush ball on it. Those things wear out after time. Like I said, they're not meant to live in. Have one of those on handies. That way if the thing keeps draining and coming out, it stinks in there very, very fast. You've got a bathroom, you've got a toilet in a small 250 square foot area, and that can get nasty real quick. Keep yourself, find out what model you have. Use a sticker on the back of the toilet, and you can order the whole ball assembly, and you can YouTube it. It's not that hard, and you can rebuild it yourself unless you want to just go buy another new toilet for about $180. Shower is what I really don't like about mine. Mine's got the tub, and you guys, I'm 215 pounds, 6'4", and when I get in, remember that Skylight I was telling you about, the bubble? The only reason I can fit in my shower is because I got that little fucking bubble, man. I can stick my head up in that thing, and I've got to bend over and scrub. But also, those of you who do follow me, I have a special needs kid, and she's a water buffalo, and the bathtub is maybe about a foot high, and we get water. Sometimes it's very difficult to not get the water all over the floor. A walk-in shower would have been badass. If I can do it over again, I would definitely get a walk-in shower. Now your sewer, when you get it, you're going to need to hook it up. A lot of people are going to get those accordion little things, those little hoses. Don't do that unless you're traveling. If you're stationary like me and you know you're going to be there for a few years, get yourself some 3-inch or even some 2-inch. I'd recommend that you do 3-inch. I flush mine out all the time. I use the 2-inch because I'm cheap. I had them, readily available. I salvaged them. But you're going to go down to Home Depot. Well, first, let's start off first. Right where this is where your black tank and your gray water tank come out. Usually, there's this little piece that comes on. It has these little hooks. That's about 3 to 4 hooks, and it slides in and locks in place. It's a little elbow, and then upon that elbow is attached the accordion drainage hose that goes into the sewer, right? Well, these things get eaten up, they get stepped on and broken. What you're gonna want to do, it's called ABS pipe. It's built for homes. You're gonna want to get yourself whatever length that you can measure from the distance of your black tank all the way to the sewer. And then you're gonna go and you're gonna buy yourself some of those rubber fitting flex hoses that fit on to the ABS pipe. It's all there in Home Depot. Just tell them I need some rubber fittings for ABS piping, and they'll help you. All you need is a screwdriver to put them together. You'll need a hacksaw to cut your pieces. Just eyeball it, put it all together. You will also need to go to an RV place and take a picture. Bring in the old piece that you have, the old connector for the accordion hose. Have them. They can either make one for you, or they have them there where it actually has a ABS piece that you can glue, or you can fasten onto the new ones that you've bought, if that makes sense. You need that special piece. They don't sell it at Home Depot. You need that one first that connects onto the sewage. Go to your RV place, tell them exactly what you're doing, and they'll know what you're talking about. And they should. If not, go to another one, because these people are dummies. But the reason why I'm telling you that is this thing can make a mess. You're dumping your tank out, and then you have to, if it gets a hole in it or something and leaks everywhere, it's just not good for anybody. Do yourself solid and just get an entire pipe, and you're going to want to put it on some blocks or something, or build yourself these little step frames for it, so that it's not bouncing around and somebody doesn't step on it and crack it. But that's your best bet as far as a permanent fix. Now, I have seen people where they get zip ties and a 2x4 if you have to use the accordion retractable hoses. Don't do that. Get yourself a gutter, a 4-inch gutter, and you can lay the pipe, your accordion pipe, inside that and fashion the gutter all the way down to your drainage pipe. And you can put boards or something underneath there. It's a lot cheaper than going and grabbing the little stilt things that they have for it. It's just a ridiculous thing. I'd recommend that you go to the ABS pipes. One thing, they are expensive, but they're really low on power and they last forever, is LED lights. Replace all of your lights inside with LEDs. It's definitely well worth the investment. Batteries, I think I spoke about those enough there. Battery tenderer and things like that. Usually these things, they work out themselves. As far as the newer ones, they keep them charged and floated. Move on to your next one is your awning. And what happens is, even if you have a covering like a zip one, which is very rare, your awning is the thing that folds out, that keeps you shaded and then rolls back in. Mine's electric. Some are manual where you pull them out. Well, those things always get rotted at the top, and when you go to open it up, the whole thing flakes and rips and falls apart. I don't even use mine. I've got my own hack of pop-up tent that I use. But what you're going to want to do is get yourself some PVC gutter, and you're going to want to cut it in lengths. You can overlap it together to kind of open and close, if that makes sense, for those of you listening. And you're going to want to cap that over your awning and fasten it with some bungees or something, and that'll protect it from the UVs breaking it up. There is a lot of stuff in here, guys. Holy shit, I'm only like halfway through. All right, the pop-up awnings, might as well go with that. There's mine are like 1 3/4 piping. I don't know, 1 5/16, I think it was. I can't remember for some reason. I should have that written down for you guys. but it's basically fence tubing, fence railing. And I spent a lot of money. That's how I build my greenhouses here, where I do my spin farming projects. I had a couple extra laying around, but I did buy myself these fittings. Basically, you can get them like go to a canopyparts.com, I think it is, or something like that. Again, I'm not affiliated with anybody, but you can get it from 1-inch pipe to all the way to 2-inch to 3-inch. But they've got these little fittings, right? These little forks, like a three-way, where where you can put your post in, then you can put your roof rafters, and you can just basically screw them all together. Reason why I don't like the pop-up tents is that they just blow out in the wind. And actually, I'd have to say that building the tents like mine, the pop-ups are kind of dangerous, because that they can blow away as well. What I've done with mine is I secured and anchored them down with sand inside of 5-gallon buckets and gravel, and actually connected it to my fastened it to my shed and also the wheels of my trailer. So you kind of might want to know what you're doing. But what's nice is that these things are very mobile. They'll pack up into like a small 5-foot by about, I'd say a 2-foot round package. You can disassemble them and take them with you, and they're very, very helpful, and makes it very nice to get shade and covering, especially when you're living so much outdoors like we are, cooking and everything, and lounging. So check out some pop-up awnings. They're really nice to have. Sheds. I've got a 10 by 8-foot shed here. They do check out where if you're going to live full time, a lot of them will allow you to have them. They may have certain stipulations of how big and can they have power to them and all that, but it definitely makes a huge difference. Because living tiny like this, it's very difficult. You always want to you always need to get away. You need some privacy sometimes, and that's very difficult in these kind of settings. It's basically like living in a hallway. All right, so your slide out. Another thing I'd like to say on there is that what you want to do is you want to get these jacks, and they're mobile home jacks. You see the slide out comes out and just goes up on this rail, and that's where usually your kitchen table is, where you go to eat, and your couch and everything. And when your kids jumping up and down, you can mess them up from the railings. What I prefer to do is get yourself some mobile home jacks, which is basically like a corkscrew. It's got this A-frame that goes down, and you got to make sure you measure and get your measurements right from the floor all the way to the top. And you want to, it basically works on a screw. You just keep screwing it and screwing until the hooks on the bottom and kind of gives it like a footing, if you understand, like a stilt. That way, when you're putting all that pressure on there, not only does this help your trailer from moving side to side, feeling like you're living in a boat, but it also will help from keeping your railing and everything from getting bent. You also want to use these, while I'm on the subject matter of jack stands, you can place these all over underneath your trailer to actually stabilize it. This is what they do for mobile homes. And that way you have minimal amount of movement happening. When someone rolls over in the bed or down the hallway, you move as well. That's kind of nice to have it stationary there. All right, guys, there's a lot of information that I want to share with you guys, and this can obviously go on for another hour or maybe another 2 hours to equal 3 hours in total. So there's a lot of information that you guys need to know before you jump into this, and I'm happy to share with you guys. And I'll have to cut this one off here until we come back again. So you guys, that's the show. Stay tuned for part 3, and yeah, we'll be back. So as I always say, guys, well, before I do the ending, check it out on YouTube, Facebook, the private group there. We always it's private, but we always accept everybody in. We just like to keep a tally on who's an asshole and who's not. And check us out on the podcast on Apple iTunes and Spotify and TikTok and Instagram. So it was a pleasure having you guys here. As I always say, have a near-life experience. Don't lose your muchness. Carry on the fire. Human up. Live it, love it, own it, bone it.